So now I'd like to introduce our second speaker for this evening, Ryan Tine. Ryan is a frontline mental health and addiction support worker in Vancouver's Downtown Eastside and is involved with the Concurrent Disorders Recovery Program. His work has been in the areas of transgender health and rights, harm reduction, and housing first models and mental health issues. For those of you that don't know what housing first models are, we can have a conversation about that later. Ryan has personal lived experience with bipolar disorder, complex trauma and addictions, and was a street youth after aging out of the youth care system in Manitoba. Just as importantly, he's an artist, a musician, a photographer, and a nature lover. Ryan, please come to the stage.
Thank you. This podium is huge. Wow. I'd order like 3 breakfasts on it. I woke up this morning and I was thinking about what to say. A lot of my speaking has been around transgender issues. I'm a female-to-male transsexual. I began my transition about 12 years ago, and it's pretty much completed now. So that's something I'm used to talking about, but one thing I'm not used to speaking a lot about is mental health issues and my own struggles and resiliency around it. And I had 6.5 years in recovery up until the summer. And I wasn't, this morning when I woke up, I thought about whether or not I should share this, and it made me realize just how much I stigmatize myself. 3 months ago today, I was pulled off of the Granville Bridge after a 4-month relapse and was carted off to St. Paul's Hospital. And during that time, I witnessed something just so much more different from what I had experienced in the past during previous hospitalizations. And I could often hear the nurses doing shift change outside of my room. They put me on a general ward so I wouldn't run into any of the tenants of the programs that I work in the Downtown Eastside. And quite often I heard them say, Ryan is a mental health worker in the Downtown Eastside. So he's up here and he's detoxing, and we're just getting him stable on his meds. And they treated me really, really well. And to me, while it was nice to feel that, it was also disappointing in that I have many clients, tenants in the Downtown Eastside who go off to the hospital in the same condition, and they are just simply sent back. Their medications aren't adjusted. They're not sent to detox centers. They're not given the same level of care that I received. And one of the things that really struck me was one of the doctors had looked at me and said, "Don't worry, we take care of our own." And I wanted to reach up out of, and had I not been withdrawing, I may have reached up, but it just really hit me hard. And my thought was, everybody should be treated this way. Everybody should be given a medical bed when they're that sick. Everybody should be admitted. Everybody, should be given 5 or 6 different care teams in the hospital. And during my time there, they got to the bottom of a lot of things for me. And I think my biggest issue and one of the biggest stigmas that I hold, that I struggle with the most, is complex trauma. With that comes with, thinking that, maybe I'm not. One thought process is, I'm not worthy of relationships. I'm not worthy of success in life. And those are old tapes that, stem from my childhood. And it's been a struggle to overcome those and really fight those old demons. And when you're 17 years old sitting in your own apartment, and you've gone from a locked facility and you were institutionalized as a youth for no reason other than crappy parents, and then suddenly you're shot out on your own, and you're expected to make it. And you're sitting there thinking, who cares? Who really cares about me? You internalize those messages. It's like that message is just perpetuated and it's consistent. And so I fell into addictions and ended up on the street. And Winnipeg is not, it's not an easy place, but to be on the street, especially when you're young. But I somehow found the tools that I had, that I had developed to try and survive as a child. I was able to grasp those and apply them to my time on the street. And then I eventually got off the street, and I was able to apply those to the struggle that I felt, trying to make a life for myself and promising myself that I was never going to be the person that put me in the state that, I was left in when I was a child. I wanted something better for myself, and I did promise myself very young, I will never be like them. I will never be like the people who hurt me. And someday I am going to be worthy of love, and I don't know why I got that message to myself when I was young. It just came up, and I've hung on to that. A social worker once told me, she said, when you, and I hadn't aged out yet, and she said to me, when you use drugs, that little light inside of you, everybody's got a light, and I hold firm to this. I believe this to be very true. Everybody's got a light inside of them, and every time we do something that's self-destructive, and we feed into that self-stigma and self-loathing, be it drugs, alcohol, gambling, sex addictions, whatever you're living with, that light starts to dwindle. But that light, like that wick the spark will never go out. It's whether we choose to look inside and really see our own self-worth and realize that, I'm not what society has told me that I am. I'm not, my behaviors. People aren't what they do. People are who they are deep inside, and people struggle for various different reasons. But she said, the less you use, the more that light will get stronger, and one day it will just surround you. And I still had a lot of using to do, and I eventually did sober up in my late 20s. But it's been just a little talk that I continue to have with myself, and I repeat that in my head. It's not always easy. And it did start to dwindle quite a bit when I did relapse in mid-2015. And when I was in the hospital detoxing, just feeling like I was not worth anything, a friend of mine who had been, supportive, had a date and planned. And so I texted her and I just said, so how was your date? And she said, well, it didn't happen. It got canceled, but that's okay, because to be honest, I'd rather go on a date with you. And that struck me, because I was like, okay, I'm sitting in this hospital bed, I'm shaking my ass off, I'm puking all over the place, and I'm not mentally stable. This person is clearly crazy enough for me, So, and and then I just realized that, maybe, just because people are in a dark place doesn't mean that they're any less worthy of love, and maybe there are people who will see the worth that each and every one of us hold. And so I jumped on that chance, because this person is phenomenal, and has continued to be phenomenal, and I feel very lucky in that, I was able to find love in probably the darkest moment of my life. And a friend of mine told me shortly after I got out of the hospital, she said, I think you're probably the only guy I know that can go from, jumping off a bridge to, or wanting to jump off a bridge, to having a relationship and sobering up, and getting back to work in less than 2 weeks. And these things happen, and So it was a memorable thing, and it's something that I'm going to hold dear for the rest of my life, which I hope will be a long one. And so I think for me, I wanted to, I wrestled with it all day at work, and I work in the Downtown Eastside, so the people I work with are, suffering from stigma, you know, that's placed on them by healthcare providers, and they also have their own self-stigma, because they don't believe that they're worthy of the care they should be getting. And how can you believe it when you're not receiving it? It's hard. And so that's why I work in Housing First facilities, because I can be that point of care that tells people, you are worth this, and try and plant at least a seed in people so that they have, they can access something in themselves, so they can find that fire within themselves, that they deserve to know is there, that they deserve to nurture and have nurtured. Not everybody is ready to do that, but I can love them until they're ready to love themselves, and even then I will continue to love them, because they're fellow human beings who are walking a struggle that I once walked, and may potentially walk again in the future. I hope not, but none of us are immune. And addiction and mental health certainly doesn't discriminate. Human beings do. So I thought to myself while I was at work, like, I do need to tell this story and share it, because there's strength in vulnerability, and I want to continue to access my vulnerability, because when I do, it gives me ownership of what I live with and my history. And I do own these things. They are my life. They all have played into who I've become today and who I will continue to evolve to be. So I think it's important that we don't hold shame over the fact that we have a mental illness, addictions, that the province was our caregivers, that the people acting as my parents were paid $13 an hour when I was a teenager, but some of them are still in my life today and have continued to love me and care. And I think for me that's been a saving grace, and it's given me something that a lot of people don't have. Most people have one or two parents. I have like 7 or 8 people who are going to kick my ass when I need it. And so I feel very fortunate in that. Yes, it's a painful memory, and yes, I do live with a lot of intrusive memories every day. It's the nature of complex trauma. But it's how I choose to function on a day-to-day basis, and who I choose to let in, and how I choose to present myself in the world, and how I choose to talk to myself every day. I do look in the mirror every day and say, I love you, because I deserve that, and we all deserve that. And I think everybody in this room should go home tonight and look at yourself in the mirror and tell yourself that you love yourself, and genuinely mean it. It sounds cheesy. Do it for a week, and you will see that your self-esteem will improve a bit. And I don't mean to sound like Tony Robbins here or anything. I'm certainly not as tall as him, but but some of these things that are cliche are so true. And when you live a life like I have, sometimes you do have to grasp at anything, and it's grasping at anything you can that gives you ideas and gives you the strength to continue to be vulnerable and tell your story, because that's where you get the power from. When you can stand up and say, life's been kind of fucked up, but you know what? Here I am. So I think it's just important to continue to tell our stories, and it's I'm really honored that I've been asked to do this, and I just want to thank you all for listening to a snippet of my story tonight. Thank you.
indeed. Just because you're in a dark place doesn't make you any less worthy of love. That was my takeaway quote for tonight. Thank you, Ryan. Thank you for sharing some of your light with us tonight.